Where the fuck do you get the balls?
Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go. But I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put
Not good. Believe me, not good.
A pleasant good morning, dissidents. Welcome one and all to the Do Dissidents podcast, the Morning Dew edition. Friday, 9 a.m. means wake up early and be here with us. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular, of course.
Hello.
Hope everybody's feeling bright and sunny. It's a bright and sunny day here in upstate New York. Been a very stormy summer, which is winding down just a couple of weeks until we turn the calendar to September, which means Russell flies to the other side of the world. Woo! Going to Italy and Greece. Russell will be
16
appearing.
days, 17 days, 17 days.
Okay, so it's not as long as the India trip, but you'll be gone for a couple weeks.
No, I mean, I'm out of here 17 days. It's actually a little longer than the
longer.
India
Okay,
trip.
that's what I thought because I'm booking guest hosts. That's why. So I just wanted to make sure I had that right.
5th to the 5th.
Beautiful, beautiful. Craig Pastajardula is going to be our guest host on September 8th, the first Friday that you're gone, and I'm working on lining up some other guest hosts for the morning shows. Russell will be joining for the evening shows from Europe, but mornings we'll have guest hosts every Friday. But thank you guys very much for being here.
In Florence, I'm going to have the Duomo in the background. I'm totally going to do some Hannibal Lecter shit.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Have you ever seen the Duomo in Florence, Clarice?
Yeah, there is a lot. There's a lot of scenery that maybe you could show us to take some videos on the trip, and we'll put together a little piece. That will be a lot of fun. But it is mid-August right here, so the weather is warm. Hope you're bright and early. Hope you have a 3-day weekend. Summer Fridays, right? Don't the PMC get off Fridays in the summer? That's a thing. Summer Fridays. The people who work really hard and talk about how, they don't want to pay more than 30% in the taxes or, whatever. Do you know how hard I work for my money? Yeah. Except during the summertime when I get Fridays off and we go to Jersey Shore.
Well, it's funny, before the world became so 24-hour days, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, the wealthy, the business people in the summertime, they would go to their estates. Like, basically, they would shut everything down for the summer. And they would come back in the fall. That's all those mansions up Fifth Avenue. That's what they were for. They would shut up their townhouses in the city, which was downtown, what we would call downtown today, and they would go have a lovely summer.
Yeah. And a lot of countries. I mean, France, they basically shut down for August. August is the vacation month, so we are right in the middle of that, but we do have a lot to get to today, and we have a hard out at 11:30 because I am going to see the Barbie movie, which Russell saw yesterday, and we're going to review it on Sunday. So we're not going to say anything about Russell's opinion of the movie because we want to keep you in complete suspense until Sunday when we will have our joint review. But I'm going at noon, so I have to be out of here by 11:30. So that's the break. So that's still a great 2.5-hour show that we have in store for you. Wonderful crowd in here, 238 strong in the YouTube chat, 56 over on Rumble. Hit that like button wherever you are. Help us juice that algorithm in the morning when there aren't enough. I shouldn't say there aren't enough, but there aren't as many people watching YouTube in the morning as there are in the evening. So we need all the help from the algorithm that we can get. The way you help us do that is you smash that like button wherever you are and hit that subscribe button. And if you're over on Rumble, please hit that follow button. All right, let's waste no time. Let's waste no time getting into the segments. But first, as always, the book recommendation.
Ah, yes. Okay, so we're doing a lot of jolly old segments. And one of them is about the hate speech laws that you have there, which are almost inconceivable for Americans in their extremity, although some people are trying, as we'll get into. And one of my favorite books I've ever read about England is an oldie, and I'm sure most of it doesn't apply anymore. Among the Thugs. This is a classic about the football hooligans. I don't think you have that there anymore. But this was, there was a terrible movie based on it with Elijah Wood called Green Street Hooligans, I think it was called. Absolutely awful. But the true story is an American reporter basically embedded himself, I think it was Manchester United with a football club, and reported on their, rioting and acts of violence around games. And at the end of the book, it always stayed with me. He saw it as a bunch of people who had lost their empire and with it their sense of purpose, trying to assert their masculinity and dominance in a really absurd and tragic way. That was how he read the football hooligan phenomena. That was his final conclusion. But I gotta say, compared to some of what we're gonna get into later, makes the football hooligans look pretty good. Bring back the football hooligans. That's what I say. And if we have any British people in the chat, I'm kind of curious. Whatever, like, it seems like that just went away. Like, at the time that this was written, that was a huge news story, and people didn't really know what to make of it, because over here in America, our experience of England is mostly through the best of the BBC. So we get this very masterpiece theater impression of England. So the idea of England having these Clockwork Orange-esque roaming bands of football hooligans, like, nobody knew what to make of it. One of the things in that book that always stayed with me, actually, was they consulted American football executives, and the British football executives were asking them incredulously, so you have no violence? You have no mass mob violence at football games? Like, they just couldn't even wrap their heads around it. They just didn't understand how that didn't happen at American athletics, which, you know, is very man bites dog, because you think of the English as the well-behaved ones and us as the fucking animals.
All right, let's get into segment number 1. Folks, this is sort of a self-referential segment here. Might even say self-indulgent, but we think it offers some teachable wisdom. As some of you guys know, Russell Dobular and myself were featured in The Guardian this week. The Guardian, which we teased out, we were interviewed for the newspaper about our take on AOC's sort of sunscreen hawking video. And so here we are. Here is the Guardian, fake news Guardian, failing Guardian. It's a failing paper.
It's failing. They were always asking me to subscribe. They were always telling me how many articles I read this year, and I don't care.
I don't care. I only read the ones that I'm in. That's the only time I read The Guardian, is when they have something to say about me. And it's usually very bad, because it's a fake paper. It's a failing paper. Nobody reads it anymore. No one tagged us, saying, hey, you're in The Guardian, because no one reads The Guardian. It's an irrelevant paper. No one reads it.
I said to somebody, I'm in The Guardian. They said, what's that?
What's that? Yeah, right. They said, what's that? I had to remind them what it is. I didn't even remember myself until I got the email. I said, oh, yeah, that newspaper. Sunscreen socialism. AOC divides the left with call for better skincare options. So I'll read this until we're mentioned here. The burning debate on the American left this week is sunscreen socialist. It was sparked last Thursday when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke out about the poor quality of sun creams in the U.S. compared to elsewhere. Quote, I was in South Korea earlier this year, and it is so clear how far advanced the rest of the world is on sunscreen, and we deserve better in the U.S., the congresswoman said in a social media video filmed with Charlotte Palomino, a skincare brand CEO. Ocasio-Cortez said the FDA regulations on sunscreen, which haven't been updated since 1999, are needlessly blocking Americans' access to higher performance UV filters that can be found in other countries. It's not too corny. Please contact your member of Congress, Ocasio-Cortez instructed her viewers. Ask them to break through some of the regulatory barriers at the FDA. The idea isn't particularly controversial among skincare experts. For years, dermatologists have pointed out the advanced ingredients in non-U.S. sun creams would provide better cancer protection than the ingredients that are allowed in the U.S. See, so already you could tell the slant of the piece. They're not on our side. They're not on our side, folks. Well, we are against pressuring the FDA, which is an esteemed democratic institution. We trust them fully and completely. I don't appreciate them peddling this misinformation.
Safe and effective. I'm just going to say, who knows? Maybe the person's crazy. But we did have a commenter on our original sunscreen video who was from Australia who said, no, because it's regulated as cosmetics. They got all kinds of shit in our sunscreen. You got aluminum chips. You don't know what's going on with it. So they seem to feel it was better that it's regulated as a drug.
Interesting.
That was their opinion.
Interesting.
I can't speak to the accuracy of random commenter on YouTube, but that's what they said.
But AOC's video touched off a surprisingly fiery reaction from some elements on the left who accused her of a pale imitation of the anti-capitalism she promised. On Monday, The Rhode Island chapter of the DSA torched Ocasio-Cortez, the DSA's most famous member, over the sunscreen video. A true tribune of the working class, the chapter wrote sarcastically on X, formerly known as Twitter. When the United Farm Workers Union replied in a comment that, quote, protection from the sun is absolutely a working class issue, the Rhode Island DSA shot back, even if this is a workplace safety issue, her analysis is not socialist, but soccer mom consumerism, complete with her brand owner partner. The DSA chapter also reposted a meme by the left-wing podcast Do Dissidents that said anyone who wasn't triggered by AOC's sunscreen video, was, quote, not a leftist. Now, that is not true.
Yeah,
that's
a misrepresentation.
That is a misrepresentation of our meme. I will put our meme up here once again, just so everybody can see it for themselves. What the meme says is, if this triggers you, meaning rich men north of Richmond, but this doesn't, then you're not a leftist. In other words, if you are trashing the song, but you're making excuses for the sunscreen hawking, then you're not a leftist. It's not a blanket statement. If you are not hot and bothered by AOC's video, then you're not really on the left. So that is a misrepresentation of what we said.
That's probably true too. But like the Libbyist literally posted a picture of herself posing with Hillary as a schoolgirl, which means she went to the kind of school that Hillary would have been showing up at and posing for pictures with them, a very rich young lady that I know. She took exception to my posting that meme and came back about how much better the sunscreen is. So, yeah, if you're not triggered by it, you're probably not a leftist. I mean, fair enough. But that's not what the meme said. And he got into that in our interview. He brought up the United Farm Workers. And I said, yeah, that's probably like the unions, where you hear from union leadership, it doesn't really represent what the members think. And even if that were the case, so why didn't she do that video with a farm worker? Nobody would have said anything if she had framed it that way. Why didn't she do it with a guy who works on roofs, a house painter? Nobody would have said shit if she had framed it that way, like, hey, these people are out in the sun all day. That's not what she did. She went and got a brand influencer.
Right. Well, and you said that to Wilford Chan, the so-called journalist who wrote this article. And, in fairness to him, he did kind of include that perspective, just not from you, but from the Rhode Island DSA. They said, even so, this is not working class in its presentation. It's consumerism. It's sort of soccer momism, which was a way of making that point. So he did kind of get that perspective in there. But when we were doing the interview, he asked us a lot about the song, because the song was central to the meme. You had these two viral things explode at the same time. One of them got a lot of ire from the left, this song. Yet I noticed not many lefties were, going out of their way to criticize AOC. So my simple point was that if you're so bothered by the song, but not bothered by AOC doing the sunscreen thing, then, yeah, I think that's a little suspicious. That's all. I'm not saying you had to, there are certain issues where when they come up, like, for instance, Russia-Ukraine. If you are not speaking out against the Ukraine war, you're not a leftist, right? That there's no context necessary there. Like, if you're not angry about how this is being handled, and you're not angry about our role, and you don't have an accurate assessment as to how this war got started and why, then I would say you're not a leftist. I wouldn't go as far as to say that with the AOC thing. Like, if you're not rage tweeting about AOC sunscreen, then you're a pussy. No, that's not where I'm coming from. If you're rage tweeting about rich men north of Richmond, but not about AOC, that's suspect. And that's the context that was important to my point that so-called journalist Wilford Chan conveniently glossed over. Or
failing journalist, Wilford Chan. Failing journalist.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm just going to say, I'm not getting into it with people, but just keeping an eye on the conversation around rich men. What's the name?
Rich men north of Richmond.
No, rich men north of Richmond. Yeah, man. I'm gonna wind up having to make a why I left the left video over this, because what a bunch of fucking morons. What a bunch of idiots. You got some people who get it. I think most of them are in our audience. But you've got so many people who they don't want to admit this. It is so broadly true of people who define themselves as left, they don't like his cultural signaling.
Right.
And they can't say that.
Right.
So they all find excuses for not liking it, right? Because they just don't like him and what he represents. They can't admit that, especially if they see themselves as leftist. This is just a Reaganite song. No, it fucking isn't.
No, it's not.
The guy has one verse that we consider misguided about welfare. That's it. The other 95% of that song is pure economic populism. And listen,
and actually
if you,
left wing.
It's actually if you are triggered, most of it. Yes, if you are triggered by calling out and listen, we're still getting these comments. Yes, we got the minors reference. Shut up. We got
we're joking, so we don't.
We're joking, okay? Shut up about it already. Jesus, I got fucking IM'd about that. Hey, I just want to tell you that. Yeah, we know. We're smart guys.
We know. You try doing a show in East Berlin, and then you can be as on the nose as you want.
But aside from that, the whole song is economic populism, and I gotta say, 90% of the comments I see from people, even people who consider themselves outside of the Democrats, leftists, they're all attacking this fucking song, man. You got maybe like 10% who see, wow, this is the wages of Clintonism. These people used to be the bedrock of the left. And now, what do you think, man? Where were they going to go? The people who went out of their way to express contempt for them, or towards the people who at least pretend to like them? And when they went to the people who pretend to like them, they picked up some Reaganism. And complaining about the taxes, I don't consider that right wing either, because where are their taxes going? Where are they going? To Ukraine? Of course he's complaining about his taxes. The guy's got no health care. His kids can't get free education. You don't get any of the things you get in other Western countries for your taxes. So how is it right wing to complain about taxes that he doesn't get anything back for?
All right, so here is the point where Russell gets quoted. One of those disillusioned leftists is Russell Dobular, a Manhattan-based theater director and co-host of Due Dissidence, the podcast that tweeted the attack on AOC's sunscreen advocacy. Were we the only podcast that attacked AOC's sunscreen advocacy? Back in 2018, he says, I went out and volunteered for her. I was arguing with the old ladies on the streets of Astoria, he says. But since then, he's grown bitter over AOC's closeness to Democrats like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, as well as her failure to hold the line on issues like Medicare for All, the infrastructure bill, and the railroad strike. I would not campaign for this sunscreen AOC, he said. He now refuses to support Democrats or the DSA and prefers third-party candidates like Cornel West. So that was the only quote. I did not get quoted, which is fine by me. But,
look, man, you got to stop screaming "fuck the country" every time we do an interview.
Exactly. But, this is a situation where,
if only all of America had but one neck. Of course they didn't quote you. They can't put that in The Guardian.
No, I mean, he asked me a lot about the song and a lot about that, and I don't care that I didn't get quoted. That's not the issue. The issue is, it's something that, I've had happen before. We used to have a regional paper called the Times Herald Record come and review our plays back when I did theater. This was about, this was 15 years ago, and it was a fairly big paper, and they were really cool. They would come and review a show a week before it opened. And then, back then, the paper had a lot of circulation. Those were like the very end of the analog days. So, like, that paper had, as of 2018, a circulation of about 20,000. It was probably at least double that 10 years prior to that. And it worked. When they printed the review of the play, we would make sure that day we had people in the theater manning the phones, and we would take reservations over the phone. So they were great. We never made a big deal out of it because they were doing us a great favor, and it's fairly benign, right, when you're writing about a play. But you would notice quotes get misinterpreted or context get lost. Like, it happens all the time. Russell, you were talking about how this happened to you.
Yeah. So this is, this might be the first time I ever got interviewed, actually. So I was producing a play when I was going to school in Albany. I was basically, the way I was working it in those days, I would take my student loan money at the beginning of the semester and I would finance a production with it, and then I would take the money back from the box office. So I had a good little money laundering scheme there. I was using my federal loans to finance my theater work. But I produced a play that actually got made into a movie. Unidentified Human Remains and the True Nature of Love was the name of it. It was a Canadian play. And it had been written at a time in the AIDS crisis when they still thought that maybe you could get AIDS from touching someone with AIDS. And so I cut that. And so I told the interviewer, yeah, I cut the stuff about AIDS because it was written when we didn't know as much, so it would play as silly now if you put that on stage. And I was quoted as saying I cut the AIDS stuff because it was silly.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Which, Jesus Christ, if you had an equivalent misquote today, you'd be canceled.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know, like a comparably socially charged quote like that today, you'd be in a lot of trouble. That shit would go viral.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so, it's a thing where, like, the closer you are to a story, like, I feel like whenever you know more about a particular story than the journalist who's writing about it, you notice a ton of errors. That's why you always have to read media with a very, very critical eye. We're not saying don't read media, don't read the news, don't watch the news, right? But you also have to always have to look at it critically, because almost every time when I've been involved in something that gets reported on, I can point to numerous errors or misinterpretations or missing context or incorrect context in the piece. And this is just another example of that. Yeah. Obviously, it was cool to be featured in the paper, but it's just one more example of that.
I mean, with the quote of me, because he did mention why I was disillusioned, in terms of the realities of trying to write a piece and include relevant information, and I don't feel like I was misrepresented. The meme was misrepresented, sure. And the overall slant of the piece, which again, I mean, that's dealer's choice. That's up to the writer. Whenever you read a piece and it closes out with a quote that strongly represents a particular point of view in a oppositional debate, you can tell where the writer's sympathies are. The writer is telling you where their sympathies are. And he closed out with a quote that was very sympathetic to AOC's sunscreen activism. So, right. I mean, the whole piece, I think, kind of favors her side of it. It makes the people who aren't on board with it look like they're crazy or they're,
or nitpicking or doing this for its own sake, getting angry for anger's sake, right? Performative, right? It definitely, yes, I definitely sensed a point of view that was not ours. But we made The Guardian, folks. That was our mainstream media debut appearance, our MSM debut in The Guardian. Thanks, Abiding, for the 99 cents. We appreciate that, folks. Tip jar is out. Super chats and Rumble rants are what make these shows possible. Taddy Mason says over on Rumble, do you remember the Captain Planet episode about AIDS? I do not, but thank you for the donation over there, my friend. I appreciate that. I saw that. We're without Jake today. Jake, our producer, pardon me, sits in on the evening shows, so I will read Rumble rants. I'm not going to be able to put them on the screen, but I will make sure I read them. So thank you all very much for your support over there. We appreciate that very much. Pat Donahue, thanks for the €10, my friend. Got so annoyed watching Bill Maher. I was in L.A. last year, and the poverty is off the charts there. How could he not see and recognize it? He's the epitome of a modern-day Democrat, so out of touch. Yes, that's exactly what the thesis of that segment was, and glad you shared our point of view there, and hope you enjoyed the segment.
Yeah,
Dickie McGee's
like
downtown. Thank you, Brocialist.
Thank you. Downtown LA, I've never seen anything like that. I've been from one end of the country to the other, and it's gotten worse since I was there. It's like a fucking zombie movie, man. You've never seen anything like it. It's like hundreds of homeless people walking down the street with shopping carts and bags. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, no, I have not been to LA in 6 years, but everything that I see coming out of there makes it pretty difficult to imagine that he would just not notice it, right? Mr. Riffley, thanks for the $10. We appreciate that. We will read some more super chats in a few moments, but we're going to move right along here. So earlier this week, MSNBC released what they considered bombshell footage of Roger Stone plotting a false elector strategy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. This tape is from November 5th, which is 2 days after Election Day, but before the race was called for Joe Biden. The race was called that Saturday at 11:30 a.m., right around brunch time, conveniently for the libs. But this would have been that Thursday. Here's Roger Stone drafting what looks like an email or a letter of sorts to try and lobby the appropriate authorities to basically engage in that false elector theory or faithless elector theory. I think you notice it was faithless electors when the liberals were pushing it. Now they're false electors when the conservatives were pushing it. Because, no, it's true.
Well, is there a legal term? Is there a legal term? It's faithless electors is the legal term.
Faithless electors is the legal term. Now, Hillary Clinton didn't get involved in doing the faithless elector thing, but a lot of liberals and Democrats did. They circulated petitions and things like that to basically send electors to the Electoral College that would honor the popular vote of the country and therefore vote for Clinton over Trump. That would have been the faithless elector strategy.
Right.
This seems fairly similar, albeit for different reasons. Now they're called false electors. Right. I don't know if there's a legal distinction there, but I sense that there's a reason why they call one faithless and one false.
That's a spin distinction.
It seems like a spin distinction to me. So let's see this video.
State officials, although state officials in all 50 states must ultimately certify the results of the voting in their state, the final decision as to who the state legislatures authorize be sent to the Electoral College is a decision made solely by the legislature.
That's interesting because you see him dictating this to his assistant or whatever. You can tell people with money just really use that money to just not type out the thing. No, I'm going to dictate it to my aide with a camera on in the background, which makes it very convenient now for cable TV to be able to play this stuff. But so they're drafting an email, making their case.
Any legislative body may decide on the basis of overwhelming evidence of fraud to send electors to the Electoral College who accurately reflect the president's legitimate victory in their state, which was illegally denied him through fraud. We must be prepared to lobby our Republican legislatures by personal contact and by demonstrating the overwhelming will of the people in their state, in each state, that this may need to happen.
All right. So what he's saying there is that based on the fraud that we are claiming takes place by we mean Roger Stone, not we at the Forced Compliance podcast here, obviously. But he's saying that based on our assessment that these vote counts are fraudulent, we are lobbying the state legislatures to appoint electors to the Electoral College who will go and vote for Donald Trump in defiance of what he considered an illegitimate outcome in places like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, which all went for Joe Biden. Now, of course, you know, look, there are some in this space who buy into that theory. I don't. There are some in this space who say, how could Joe Biden have gotten 81 million votes? Well, under normal circumstances, there's no way he could have gotten 81 million votes. But the 2020 election took place under far from normal circumstances. You both had an incumbent with abnormally high negatives, which makes it more likely that, you know, a non-entity like Biden could get a high vote count.
Yeah.
Right. Negative partisanship. Exactly. Excuse me. And then you also had the circumstances. A once-in-a-century pandemic. People were not afraid when they were going to be allowed out of their house without a cloth mask over their face. Like, it was just this very, very tense situation where people felt like their leader was not leading on this existential issue. Turns out Joe Biden didn't really lead on it either, right? So in retrospect, I don't know how many would have changed their vote if they voted just based on that. But point is, I don't buy into any of those theories that he was pushing. And it's doubtful whether Roger Stone or Donald Trump bought into them either. But here's the thing. If you can't prove that they were lying about the fact that they thought they'd been robbed, then it's very difficult to prove criminality, which was the crux of Glenn Greenwald's point on a recent episode of his System Update show. So we're going to play a brief minute of this.
What is it that Donald Trump did exactly that was illegal? He definitely sued in court multiple times and lost, which is absolutely his right to do. He told Mike Pence what he heard from his lawyers was Mike Pence's ability to do, even if it wasn't, which is act as that vice presidential role and reject as certified results, ones that he regarded had evidence of fraud, and send them back to the states. He arranged for an alternative state of electors to be ready to be anointed in the event he could prove that there was fraud. But what about this is criminal? Which of these steps are illegal? You really have to stretch the law to make it into a crime. I'm not saying it's impossible, but this is what I've been saying from the beginning. If we're going to abandon decades worth of consensus among Washington elites and the political and media class, consensus that I have not shared, that I have rejected, but I only want it abandoned if it's going to be applied legally to equally to everybody. I don't want it to be a one-time only exemption for Trump.
All right, so he's saying unless you can prove intent, it's very difficult to establish the case that he's guilty of a crime. And if you want to loosen those standards of proof of intent for powerful people, like, I mean, Roger Stone calls himself a dirty trickster. I think it's almost impossible to believe that Roger Stone actually feels that there was sufficient fraud to cost Donald Trump the win in any individual state, much less the entire country. All right. But, you know, this guy, Roger Stone, helped orchestrate the Brooks Brothers riot in 2000, which resulted in the stopping of the counting of votes. And it was when the Supreme Court finally intervened to stop the counting of votes that the race was called for George W. Bush. And so that was an example, that Brooks Brothers riot was an example where you actually had recounts going on, Bush's margin shrinking, and then you had a bunch of guys dressed in, you know, PMC garb, that's why they called it the Brooks Brothers riot, go to a precinct where they were counting ballots and said, baselessly, he threw away a ballot, he tampered with a ballot, and a riot started and the counting was called off. And that helped stall the counting process until the Supreme Court intervened, bang of the gavel, election over, Bush wins. Bush wins. So the point is, who went to jail for that? Who was penalized for that? That was election meddling that stopped the actual counting of votes. What happened as a result of that? You want to say that that was based on a lie, or that even if it wasn't based on a lie, it was tampering with a vote count and make that a crime? Okay, I'd be for that. Sounds like Greenwald will be for that too. But we already have precedent where no price was paid for any of that bullshit. Right. And now you're going to throw the book at Donald Trump, and are we going to set this as a new precedent moving forward? We already know we're not, because they're already affording Hunter Biden these plea deals and all kinds of shit, right? So like, this is not ushering in a new era where we sort of take a more realistic approach to what powerful people knew and how they knew it and how they weaponized that and how they sort of manipulate, okay, I really believe this versus I don't. If you want to be tougher, if you want to get tough on crime, meaning tough on DC capital crime, and really hold these people's feet to the fire in every instance, okay, you could set that precedent, but you're not setting that precedent. You're making an exception, as Greenwald says there, for Trump, and you are deliberately interpreting everything he says in the most uncharitable way in order to build a case against him. Same thing with, he was on the phone asking the Secretary of State of Georgia, find me 11,870 votes, right, what it was. Greenwald says this in the beginning of that broadcast as well. He said, if you can prove that Donald Trump actually didn't think he had those votes, then that could be a crime, because then he's saying, create 11,000 votes for me. That's a crime. If you say, find me 11,000 votes that you actually believe are there, then simply petitioning for that to happen is not a crime, because as we know, whoever was on the receiving end of that email that Roger Stone was sending, the guy on the receiving end of the phone call that Trump made, they all said, nope, sorry, we don't see any evidence for what you're saying, so we're not going to take any of this action that you want us to take. The election results were certified. Biden won. That's how it happened. So basically what you had, as Greenwald said there, was, yeah, they went to court and they lost. They made these requests, or even if you want to put it more severely, they made demands. Those demands were rejected. The results were certified, and Biden took office on time. And so how you make a crime out of those things becomes a difficult question. Of course, a key part of making those things a crime is January 6th, because that's the example you can point to and say, well, look at what this led to. But he's already got a separate indictment for January 6th. And that's a whole nother story, as we talked about last week. Right. So, you know, in that sense, the case is a lot more flimsy. And this Roger Stone video was trending all over Twitter as a smoking gun. He's asking them to do something, which they said, no, we're not doing it because there's no evidence. And the results were certified. So I don't know how that's evidence of a crime. It's evidence of sleaziness and scumminess and dishonesty. And under normal circumstances, that kind of behavior would be politically disqualifying. In other words, a country that looks at a guy who's trying to, yes, win an election that he didn't really win, they would look at that and say, well, we can't trust that guy with power anymore. Right? But these are not normal circumstances, obviously. We are living in a collapsing empire where the country has fallen apart to such an extreme extent that a guy like that is not disqualified, because people feel, as I've articulated several times over these past few shows, the country no longer has anything to lose by turning the White House over to this guy. They don't feel that, because they don't feel that this quote-unquote democracy of ours is delivering for people. You just had an entire island burned to a crisp, and Joe Biden offers $700 per household to the people of Maui. You know what the population of Maui is? 168,000 people live on Maui. It's a very, very small island. Hawaii is a very, very low population state. If you gave every individual on Maui $700, it would cost about $117 million. Every individual. They're giving every household. $117 million if you gave every person on Maui $700, which is an insultingly low figure. We're spending $1/10 billion on direct aid to people in Maui, while we've sent $100 billion to the war in Ukraine. That's why the people are not holding Donald Trump to account for any of this treacherous bullshit. It's because you have a collapsing system. And so what the people will not do, the Department of Justice is trying to do itself by making all kinds of exceptions and building what I think is a pretty flimsy case.
Well, watching the Roger Stone thing, I don't know why they thought that was a smoking gun, because he never says, okay, so how are we going to get around this? Right? He speaks like a person who believes what he's saying. Right? That this election was rigged, that it's false, that it's, you know, a crime. And with Trump, I think it's harder to explain away asking for a certain number of votes. But you're right. I mean, technically, he can make the argument, well, because that's what we needed. But I'm sure there were 100,000 votes that went uncounted. However, we were talking about this offline. Apparently, Georgia's state version of RICO has even lower standards of evidence, or lower standards of evidence than the federal version. They're going to convict him on, if not this, other things. As I've said from the beginning, they're not going to let this man be the president again. So Greenwald is not wrong that this is a political prosecution, and I very much doubt if Trump had not decided to run again, that these prosecutions would be happening. Like maybe the January 6th shit, probably not even that. They would have just done a report and made a statement. If he had gone off into the sunset, they probably would have left him alone. But they can't let this man be president again, and they won't. So all that goes out the window. On the face of it, yes, he's guilty. I mean, he's guilty. But he's guilty in terms of the spirit of the law. Is he guilty in terms of the letter of the law? I mean, does anyone believe that he really thought that there was this massive fraud that cost him the election? Probably
in Trump's
not.
case, I think it's possible because
I mean, certainly the people around him didn't.
Well, this is
Roger Stone's been around the block a few times. He knows shit from Shinola.
No, look, Roger Stone is a pro. Trump is a giant Eric Cartman. He's never admitted defeat or failure in anything he's ever done. So if there's one guy who would be convinced that the only way he could ever come in second place is because he was cheated, it's him.
Maybe,
in terms of Roger Stone, and like I said, it's an open question. As Greenwald said, can you make that case? Sure, you can make that case, but it's a tough case to make. It's not an open and shut case, and it may not be a case that's provable beyond a reasonable doubt. And so we will just have to wait and see how that unfolds. There's going to be plenty more to report on that stuff in the coming weeks and months. These are just the opening salvos. Once we get into the trials, there's going to be a lot of deep dives that we're going to have to do on all of this.
All right, I'm just going to say, man, I'm not one to watch like these celebrity trials and things. Just a side note, Netflix just dropped the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, in its basic entirety. Yeah, I'm going to watch that shit. I like that one. Is interesting. I've got to see the shitting on the bed testimony. I must.
Yeah, you're interested in that. That's your big one.
It is very rare that I take an interest in something like that, but this one looks interesting.
All right.
Maybe we'll cover that.
Hit that like button. We might get a 666 music drop in here after all on Friday morning. We're getting there. Close. Hit that like button. Let's get some more people in.
28 more.
28 more, indeed. And we'll make that happen. You can also support this program by going to patreon.com/DoDissidents. You get access to exclusive patron streams, as well as call-in access to the shows. And your name up in lights on the scroll. Our next patron exclusive stream is going to be Monday, August 21st. At 8 p.m. That's going to be a fun show. Those are over on Rumble. And so we thank you very much for your support, everybody. This is by far the best way to support the show is become a patron at patreon.com. You can also go to dodissidents.substack.com as well and join our free email list or become a paid subscriber. That's the Substack link. The Patreon link is here. If you sign up on the $15 a month patron tier or higher, you get some merchandise as well. And we actually have a merch model who is waiting in the wings. I'm going to admit her right now to model this for you all. Ellen Jimerson. Ellen, why don't you show everybody the swag?
All right.
Oh,
beautiful. It just came in
I
the
don't
mail.
even have one of those.
Beautiful. Just came in the mail. There's the Dude Dissidents t-shirt. And then what are you drinking this morning? Beautiful.
Oh,
coffee mug.
And you want to talk about the mug making it taste so much better? It's awesome.
It tastes better in that mug, doesn't it?
It does. And the shirt is just bringing out all my terrific features.
Excellent. Well, we like to
so
hear that.
I say, you get to say it too.
What do I get to say?
What do we
Was
get?
that a cue that I missed?
Our ceramics are infused with shrooms, which is ironic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Keaton's never tripped. He can't drink out of our mugs.
Well, neither have I. I'm a child of the 60s, and I've never once tripped.
Really? All right.
Not
so
ever.
that's going to be a special patron episode. The three of us are going to take
right, exactly. Yeah.
And talk about politics.
No, I was saying it was your cue is to say how fabulous I look in this soft and wonderful t-shirt.
Well, of course. Yes. No, you do look very, very fabulous in that soft, wonderful t-shirt. It is not a Gildan t-shirt. You requested that because Gildan.
I noticed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ellen,
thanks you.
Tell us, where did you get that incredible shirt and mug?
You want me to tell you right now?
Yeah.
Yes. How did you get that?
How did you
I've never seen that in any store.
I got this by being a simp for due dissidents.
That's
I
right.
send them money every month, and they send me a T-shirt and a mug.
And that's right. You're signed up as the simp tier on YouTube, but you're also signed up through Patreon and Substack. So yeah, everybody who signs up for 15 bucks a month or more, you get a shirt and a mug. We will send them to you. And so you look fantastic in it, Ellen. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for getting that ready for us this morning. So yeah, go to patreon.com.
I had to get up early to get all pulled together.
So you're in Alabama. Are you Central Time or Eastern over there?
Central.
You're Central. Okay. So so it's 8 a.m. start time over there. So it's
I
just
know.
getting to be 9 a.m. now.
I have a loud husband and loud dogs.
She said resentfully.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, some people are watching from California. They wake up at 6 a.m. for this over there.
Yeah,
that's a very dedicated
incredible.
audience.
Incredible.
Indeed.
Yeah.
We appreciate all that.
Today's the day the Europeans have it easy.
Exactly. 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. matinee overseas. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for the call. We appreciate you getting all that ready for us, and thank you, as always, for your support.
Thank you, Ellen.
Beautiful. Ellen Jimerson, looking fantastic in her Due Dissidents merch. Like I said, sign up to support the show for 15 bucks a month or more, and you get that included with your subscription. Folks, we are also raising money through GoFundMe. We are up to $855 on our GoFundMe fundraiser. So thank you so much to everyone who has donated. This is putting together a tour of the GOP primary states. And like we said, we will cover the primaries as long as there are contested primaries to cover. And then what we have left over, we'll go to a general election swing state tour. So we are going to put all of these donations to very, very good use. $6,000 is what we need to do this the right way, to get out there, to shoot video, to get equipment, lodging, transportation, all that stuff is not cheap. And so that is where all this will go. We are trying to hit that $6,000 goal by the end of the year. We are already more than 10% of the way there, which is a good start. We like to see that. So thank you so much to everybody who has donated. You can go to GoFundMe.com or GoFund.me, I'm sorry,
and this will
search Due
stay
Dissidents.
up here
there
as
you go.
inspiration for as long as we're doing that fundraiser.
Exactly.
We want to do our Fear and Loathing. And for those of you who haven't seen, this is my special Hunter Thompson autographed copy, and also autographed by the aforementioned Johnny Depp.
Beautiful. Yeah, that is worth something, that book. If we don't hit the fundraiser amount, Russell's going to have to sell his book.
I'm going to have
we
to
don't
sell,
want that.
Yeah,
he's going to have to part
sell
with
the
his
book
prized
to go
position.
out on the road.
Exactly. So we don't want Russell selling his prized possession. So please help us get there. And thank you so much to everybody who already has. GoFund.me / all that stuff if you want to write it down. Or you can go to GoFund.me, and if you just search the name of this show in the search bar, it'll bring you right there. That's probably the simplest way to do it if you don't have this link handy. But we thank you very much to everybody who has already donated, and it's going pretty well so far. So that's how you can support this show and get some merch and build some goodwill and get access to some Patreon exclusive streams. All of that is extremely helpful, and so we thank you all very much for that. We'll do a couple more super chats here before we get to segment number 3. Jack Carolyn, thanks for the $2. Ecstasy ended football hooliganism. Interesting.
Is
all
that
right.
true?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
true? Was
an
the
explanation.
ecstasy, it pacified them?
That's an explanation. Chant of the Moldaya, feel free to abbreviate my name. No, it's okay. We don't have to. I like saying that name. I swear I really am a Patreon. The name doesn't match. I'm one of those that's pathologically unresponsive. Okay, well, thank you very much for your support. And I believe I remember you signing up with a name that could be something similar, but it rings a bell. Thank you very much. Grab a couple coffees. Keep up the great work. Thank you for that coffee money, NK. We appreciate that very, very much. KN Kareen. Kind of agree with Chris Matthews. Yes, some of the policies are going too far. Where I disagree is that we need to hold rich peeps accountable 2. Yeah, we're going to get to Chris Matthews a little bit later on the show. That was something. He just kind of surfaced out of nowhere and appeared on Breaking Point. So it's kind of a random thing that happened, but I thought it was pretty funny. So that's good Friday morning material.
Yeah, this is the thing Chris Matthews doesn't want to acknowledge. The money, you want to argue that putting more money in the system can be inflationary. You can make that argument. What he's not touching is, well, how about you redistribute it back to the way the economy was distributed when you were a young man, right?
Right.
Maybe take the money away from the CEOs and the executives and the billionaires and distribute it back among the people. Would that be inflationary? I mean, if you want to argue that without redistributing it, it's inflationary, maybe. So why not redistribute it? So you won't get into that.
Right, exactly. All right, segment number 3, Russell. This is one you brought to our attention, and one that is pretty big overseas right now in the UK. So I know we have a lot of UK viewers on Friday morning, so we try to do at least one overseas story every Friday. And this is a doozy. So, Russell, go ahead.
All right. I've been wanting to get into this for a while. So, Michigan just passed a kind of hate speech law. It passed their Congress. I'm not sure if it passed their Senate. We have the exhibit for that.
This is from Newsweek magazine, yep.
All right, so yes, this is from Newsweek. This is recent. A bill passed by the Democrat-led Michigan State House last month, which would make it a felony for people to intimidate or threaten others by disrespecting their gender identity, for example, by deliberately misgendering them, has sparked a controversy over whether the proposed law violates the First Amendment. The measure, House Bill 4474, is included in a package of legislation that would replace Michigan's existing Ethnic Intimidation Act. It would expand the existing law to cover sex, sexual orientation, age, gender identity or expression, and physical or mental disability. Religion, ethnicity, and race were already included in the previous legislation and will still be covered under the new law. The bill would make it a hate crime to cause someone to feel terrorized, frightened, or threatened with words, including by deliberately misgendering them. Okay, so this, now Newsweek, and I just want to point out, this article is written where they found a lawyer. I suspect most lawyers, particularly if they're constitutional lawyers, would be saying, well, the First Amendment protects against this, and that's great. The overall argument of the article was the First Amendment probably makes this unconstitutional, and isn't that a shame? They found lawyers who were like, it's crazy, it shouldn't be like that, but the First Amendment probably does not allow a law like this. Now, Newsweek also, in July, contracted a poll among millennials, and among that cohort, 44% believe that misgendering should be a crime, and only 31% are against. Now, in the general population, only 19% believe that should be a crime. So you're seeing a lot of people, and God knows what the numbers are in Gen Z. I would imagine it would be a very solid majority would believe that. So let's take a look at where that goes, because we have an example of that in action, because in England, hate speech, what is defined very broadly as hate speech, is literally a crime. It is literally a criminal act to use any words towards somebody that would be offensive based on their religion, ethnicity, sexuality, gender identity. So let's see how that plays out in action. We have a video that's really been making the rounds this week. What happened was this autistic 16-year-old girl, ironically enough, given how this played out, was at a pride parade with her older sister, who was 18. And because of her autism, she had been drinking. She can be kind of out of control. So the older sister was worried about getting her home safely. So this is something we would never do in America. This is very British. So she called the police to take her home. If you did that with American cops, they'd be like, you want us to do what now?
Right.
But over there, that's
most people
really
in America would know not to involve the police when you don't have to anyway. Right.
In anything, right. I mean, that's probably the result of them not carrying guns there.
Right.
So they drive her home, and her grandmother is a lesbian married to a woman. So one of the police officers had short hair, woman, and she says, I think she's a lesbian like Nan because she's autistic and she doesn't pick up on the social cues. She just says what she thinks. The woman, police officer, forced her way into the house, and this wound up being 7 police officers dragging this autistic girl with scoliosis, by the way, out of the house for hate speech. So all of this was caught by her mother on video.
Yeah, so I'll show this now, and I just want to say, this is not graphic or anything. Like, there's no blood or, nobody gets, seriously brutally injured, but it is tough to watch. I mean, it is very, especially if you're a parent and you imagine someone doing this to your kid who has a disability like that. It's absolutely horrible and absolutely chilling. So I just want to give a little warning there to any of you who might be sensitive to this. To come back in 5 minutes or so if this is going to upset you, because it's like I said, it's not graphic and violent in that way, but it is upsetting. So let's give it a play.
And let's pause at the beginning so we can read that.
Sure.
This is what police do when dealing with autistic children. My daughter told me the police officer looked like her nana, who is a lesbian. The officer obviously took it the wrong way and said it was a homophobic comment. It wasn't. The officer then entered my home and assaulted me. My daughter was having panic attacks from being touched by them, and they still continued to manhandle her.
She's made a comment in her own house. You've got her on camera. She hasn't said anything to you. Don't matter. She never got cameras on. She's getting arrested. She's getting arrested. Why are you doing units coming? Don't worry. She hasn't done anything. She's autistic. I don't care. She's
hiding in the closet.
I'm telling you, I've got units coming. She's going to be arrested tonight. And wait till the police officers coming on. Like, explain what happened.
That's why we got her on the first place.
Fucking bitch, what me if I get police on me. Calm down. She's autistic. Can you stop staring at me? She's got autism. Can you just stand there? She's in a cupboard. She can't go anywhere. She can't go anywhere. Stand there, dear. They're going to remove her for what? Because you're bothered. Think she said the word lesbian. Her nana is a lesbian. She's married to a woman. She's not homophobic. Look what you're clenching your fist. Go away from my
Yeah, you're clenching your fist. See, so she said the word lesbian. She made, a socially awkward observation that she believes that this cop may be a lesbian. She didn't say it in a derogatory or an accusatory or, any sort
and
of
she's
negative
autistic.
Way. Right. She
like
just
that
came
should be
from
the
a
end of the
pride parade.
conversation.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
oh, okay, bye.
Exactly.
Which also, look, from an American perspective, the idea, even if she had meant it that way, that this would be illegal, such that 7 cops would come into your house and drag out an autistic girl, even if she wasn't autistic. I think she's a lesbian like Nana. Should that be illegal?
You get dragged out of your house for that?
Yeah, we very often, in doing research for this, I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole. We're tight on time. In doing research for this, I don't know how this resolved itself, but in 2020, they were proposing legislation to make hate speech in your home a crime. In your home. Why would that even be a subject of debate? Like, what? Who proposes legislation like that?
Right,
like it's very Orwellian.
What is up with you?
Right. There is something wrong with you, mate. She didn't aim it at the police officer.
Homophobic remarks at my colleague.
It's not a homophobic remark. She said, I think she's a lesbian like Nana.
If you want to bully people, you'll just get one of them badges there. That's what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Where'd it go? Where's this? Does it go into right under there?
She's autistic. She don't like people touching her. She will have a meltdown. She won't come out. She's got autism. I'm Lisa.
So she can come out. Because we're trying not to do this, aren't we? We've been trying for a long time.
Oh yeah, no, you're being really cool about the situation.
Yeah. Assaulted me for no reason. She's got autism. She's autistic, man.
The issue is, if an officer decides to arrest her,
she wasn't arrested. They brought her up.
She's under arrest.
No, but
that's the other thing about these laws is, who are you empowering to enforce them?
Exactly.
You're empowering these fucking pencil-dicked schoolyard bullies who take any offense as existential to them. And apparently that's a European phenomenon too. I always thought American cops were especially thin-skinned. Apparently not. Apparently they're just as dickless over there, right? And so who are you empowering to do this? I mean, it's unthinkable. Like, it's so infuriating. Here, let's keep going.
To me, and that officer ran in my house and assaulted me and tried to get to my daughter for no.
If you want to make a complaint about any of it, that's fine.
I am going to.
Will have been on.
I am going to. Yeah, because it is on, and she has.
She's now under arrest.
She was full of rage, and she ran in the house and she barged me into this corner.
She comes and gives her a hug. I mean, just horrible. I mean, how fucking horrible do you have to be to do that to a person?
Well, and the fact that there's fucking 7 of them, and none of them said, hey, man, let's let this go.
Right, let's let this go. You are empowered to make that decision. You have discretion as an officer. Right. Even laws being on the books what they are, whether you're for them or against them, you have discretion as an officer. Don't worry, I'll put it back on. And this person takes an observation as license to now we're going to make an arrest. This started out as a benign call. It started out, hey, she had too much to drink. She needs to get home safely. This didn't start as a hostile confrontation. It's just as she gets her in the house, she makes an observation that this woman officer then decides is a crime. We're going to call back up and have her dragged out of the house. Just unbelievable.
And I also want to make the point that a lot of the UK reporting is focused on. Yorkshire, where this took place, has terrible crime. And a recent study showed that in half of the districts in the UK, they haven't solved a single burglary in the last 3 years. And yet this is not the only story where literally hate speech, sharing a meme online can bring the police to your door in England. Yeah. We'll get into that too. This is what and a lot of people say, well, this is what they're spending their time on. And we have skyrocketing violent crime, burglary, beatings, assaults, and they're all over the hate crimes. I mean, it's an easy thing to go after. So I also explained to them she has severe scoliosis and a twisted spine. So them pulling at her arms will cause her extreme pain in her shoulders. All right, so people who think they're more civilized overseas, they're not like us over there. You can see plainly that they're not so different as we might want to think.
No, but to their credit, over on their side of the pond, the fact that they're not so different over there means they're more hesitant to arm them with guns. Right, which is why you don't have quite the violence problem over there. Right?
I'll give them that. But here, you have an increasing number, particularly of younger people, who feel that freedom of speech is a right-wing position. That's just blows my mind. That freedom of speech is there to protect people who have social power or have social capital. Does this girl look like she has social power and social capital to you? This is why you don't open that door. It is too fucking dangerous. Look, yeah, man. All of us would love a perfect, well, not Nazis, but those of us who aren't Nazis. In a perfect world, yes, we would love to stop Nazis from speaking. But the civil libertarian point of view has always been predicated on the idea that once you open that Pandora's box, the consequences are not worth the benefits.
And also there are civil penalties that can be imposed on people, even here in America, for relentlessly slurring someone or harassing someone or discriminating against someone. If you're being slurred at your place of work and they won't stop, you can absolutely take legal recourse, and there will be penalties imposed for that.
Sure.
It's not a complete free-for-all.
We have that. Yes.
And nobody here is advocating for hate speech. There are harassment laws. There's discrimination laws on the books. Like, yes, there are legal avenues that you can explore if you are being mistreated for who you are, as there should be. Right? No one's condoning hate speech. The problem is when you pass laws like this, you empower the state and the enforcers of the state, who are just so despicable. I mean, I don't want to make any broad generalizations there, but how could there be 7 cops there? This is why I always thought the bad apple argument was bullshit, because the thin blue line argument is a direct refutation of the bad apple argument. Whether it's only a few bad apples as cops or not is irrelevant. Their mentality is, the good apples have to defend the bad apples anyway, because there's a thin blue line separating law and order from chaos.
Right.
And so, yeah, you had one hot-headed cop who was so offended and so triggered by the fact that she mentioned the word lesbian in her presence, even though she's coming literally from a pride event. And what, 6 other cops can't say,
Which
hey,
they
listen.
knew because they drove her from it.
Right, exactly. They know that. Right. The 6 other cops there can't say, hey, we have to let this go. This is clearly not a crime. This is clearly, even under hate speech laws, it's not a crime because it was not meant with any malice, any ill intent whatsoever.
They held this girl for 20 hours.
Yeah.
And who knows how this would have resolved itself, but the video went viral. And so they released her, and supposedly now they're investigating what happened here. And, you know, they issued a statement. Yes, we need to look at the issue of neurodivergent people and so on. I mean, it just shouldn't be against the law. So this is just to put a button on this. I want to show how far this can go once you open this door. So not only do they have the category of the hate crime, in 2014, the UK, this is from Fire, by the way, which is kind of taken up the mantle from the ACLU of being defenders of freedom of speech, a job that the ACLU has abandoned, although that's traditionally been part of their role. In 2014, the UK College of Policing, a quasi-governmental organization tasked with issuing guidance to police officers, released the wide-ranging and influential hate crime operational guidance. The UK has long recognized hate crimes, but this guidance was unique in that it codified for the first time the concept of non-crime hate incidents. As defined by the guidance in NCHI is any non-crime incident which is perceived by the victim or any other person, to be motivated by a hostility or prejudice based on a person's actual or perceived race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or transgender status. Under the 2014 guidelines, police are required to log any NCHI brought to them by a member of the public, no questions asked. The guidance states the victim does not have to justify or provide evidence of their belief, and police officers or staff should not directly challenge this perception. Evidence of the hostility is not required. In other words, police have no obligation to investigate the veracity of the claims. In many instances, police do not even inform those accused of committing an NCHI of the complaint against them. Moreover, under the Police Act of 2014, police are required to release any information the chief officer reasonably believes to be relevant for the purpose of a background check. In other words, police may release NCHI logs to prospective employers performing background checks on prospective employees. How often police actually relay this information is unclear, but the threat is enough to spur a profound chilling effect. Okay, so listen, I know our audience. Our audience has been described as the most depraved audience on YouTube. How many of you would not be in that log on those grounds, right? Because they're not just talking about incidents, memes. If you share memes that are perceived to be threatening or hateful, the police can come to your door in England. So this is terrifying. It is what you are opening the door to in America when you start talking about making misgendering illegal and so on and so forth. Freedom of speech, I don't know why we have to relearn this or re-explain it, means defending speech that you don't like. It means defending deplorable speech. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. What does it mean if it only means speech that is approved of is acceptable?
Right. Yeah, no, indeed. Of course. Let's do a couple more super chats here. While we're on this topic, we should say we are splitting our stream on Sunday. What's this Sunday? August 20th, right? We're starting at 7 o'clock here. And then we are interviewing the filmmakers of a film called No Way Back, which is a film about detransitioners. That is going to be over on Rumble at 8 p.m. We want to start. Sorry, go ahead.
We'll be interviewing Lisa Sellen Davis, who has one of the best blogs around about the issues, particularly about transitioning and minors. Stephanie Wind is a family therapist, and both of them are heavily featured in the film No Way Back, which has basically been banned and censored, in keeping with what we're talking about here. No, it's not illegal, and they haven't been arrested, but AMC was supposed to have a screening, and they canceled it. And as far as I can tell, and I'll ask them this when we have them on Sunday, there is no streaming platform that was willing to have this film on its platform. Not Prime, not Netflix, nowhere. You cannot find this film anywhere except for their website. That is the only place you can see this movie.
Yeah, and so they'll fill you in on that there. So what we're going to do is on Sunday, we'll start the stream at 7 p.m. here on YouTube. We'll do some headlines. The interview portion will start at 8 p.m. over on Rumble. We plan to do that on Rumble anyway for a long time, and we have some other Rumble stuff coming up soon. So if you're not following us on Rumble, please go over there and do that. You could just enter it here, rumble.com/dissidents. We were planning on doing this on Rumble anyway, but I don't know if any of you guys saw Matt Orfala's tweet a few days ago. I think maybe it was even yesterday or the day prior. Got a lot of play because he tweeted out that YouTube had basically changed their COVID misinformation sort of community guidelines policies. And I thought, interesting, because, now that, the sort of emergency phase of it has been declared over by the government, maybe they're going to start being a little cooler about letting people talk about that more. No. Instead, they broadened the medical misinformation policy to all forms of medical misinformation. So now if you say anything, yes. So now anything that can be interpreted as in defiance of a medical authority can get you in trouble, which is all the more reason to have this over there since we don't know where the conversation is going to go. We have two guests on. We want to be able to speak freely and openly, which is the way we want to be able to speak as often as possible anyway. So please go follow us over there. And a big shout out to the people who are watching over there. I know you don't need this link because you have it. 77 strong in the Rumble chat now. So thank you guys very much. We see you over there.
And let me just say, if you do want to see it ahead of the interview, we can't share links here, but
you can go to
the website for the film. They have a website up, No Way Back. The producers are Deplorable Films, appropriately enough, and it's very good. I've watched it. It's about and they interviewed many detransitioners about their experience. So if you want to be prepared for the interview, you can go check it out online.
All right. So, in the meantime, head over there, hit that follow button over on the Rumble page, and thank you to everybody who's watching over there right now. Very vibrant chat over in the Rumble chat, which is what we love to see. So thank you. And we love you here on YouTube as well. Like I said, we do not plan on leaving this platform or transitioning over to the Rumble platform, but, there are going to be certain shows.
We might detransition.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There are certain shows that we're going to do over there. We might very well be doing our follow-up show on the 23rd there because we are going to try and live stream the Republican primary debate on Wednesday the 23rd. And there might be automated copyright issues we would run into on YouTube if we tried that there. Whereas Rumble, we won't have an automated issue. And all we're concerned about is the automated issue of just, Fox, who's hosting the debate, reflexively turning off any stream that shows their stuff. Right. Even though we are fully confident, there's no question about it, that to stream a presidential debate and provide commentary, that is absolute textbook fair use. You cannot get a clearer example of fair use than that. So we are not skirting any laws or regulations. We are skirting an automated system that will penalize you anyway and then have you ask questions later. That's how these big tech platforms do it. They'll turn you off automatically because there's suspicion of an issue. And even when there's not an issue, they say, oh, okay, we're sorry. Meanwhile, they've killed your stream. They've killed your audience. They've killed all the momentum. They've killed the show. So I'm going to talk to our good friend Kit over at Hard Lens Media about that, since he's had more experience streaming debates and events like that than we have. And depending on what he tells us, we'll either be here or on Rumble. But we will be streaming the debate in some way or another on Wednesday, which is all the more reason if you're watching here on YouTube. Like I said, we're going to stay on YouTube. We're not leaving YouTube, but go over there and follow us there anyway and join our Substack. That's the most important thing, because when you join our Substack, we'll tell you the day of the stream where we're going to be. If we're going to do a Rumble show, we'll let you know. tonight we're on Rumble. If we're going to be on all the platforms, we always let you know that on the announcement of the stream. It'll say tonight we're live on all of our platforms, which is YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Rockfin. There are some nights where we say, hey, tonight we're on Rumble, Twitter, Rockfin only, Rumble, whatever. So go over there and join the Substack for free. Even if you don't become a paid member, that keeps you in the loop about all that stuff. All right, so that was an emotionally intense segment we just did. Let's do a little humorous palate cleanser, shall we? Krystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty hosted Chris Matthews, of all people, on their Breaking Points podcast yesterday. Chris Matthews has been disappeared for a while. We've seen him make guest appearances on MSNBC every now and then over the past few months, but obviously he was fired from his show for workplace misconduct and also, as we suspect, making a reference.
Grabbing a few heinies there.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they used that, but that was also 2 days after the Nevada caucuses, where he compared Bernie Sanders' victory to the Nazi occupation of France. And so Krystal Ball decided she would press him on the bias of his old network, MSNBC. She pressed him on some Russiagate points, which he gave the standard boilerplate sort of deflective answers. Well, yeah, there was a lot of information there, and we connected some dots that we shouldn't have, blah, blah, blah. But the most interesting part of it by far was the anti-Bernie bias, since he was the main perpetrator of such bias here. And look at the gaslighting on his part during this interaction.
MSNBC being this liberal, and you would think that MSNBC being this liberal, progressive network overwhelmingly, and you certainly had your own point of view, that they might at least be a little bit Bernie curious, maybe a little bit, inclined towards Bernie Sanders. You had this overwhelming
Bernie Sanders. Who would be for Bernie Sanders?
Well, I'm saying...
Well, who was?
That's what I'm saying is...
Right, that's her point. She just said, given it's a liberal progressive network, you think there'd be a couple of pro-Bernie voices on the network. What do you mean, Bernie Sanders? Who supported Bernie at the network? Yeah, no, that's my point. I'm getting to the question.
Well, you are. That means you are. Do you think other people should be for Bernie Sanders?
Well, I'm asking
no,
why.
Hold
on, Chris. Hold on. Let me get to a question.
No,
okay?
because there's an implicit answer in the question.
No, but I haven't even gotten to a question
typical
yet.
question. This is a cable news network.
Chris,
well, you're answering the question with your question.
I love how he means that as a dig. This is a cable news network, as if he did not host a cable news network called Hardball with Chris Matthews, where he engaged in that exact same method of very pointed questions and sort of leading with his opinion to put the guests back on their heels. That was the whole premise of the show. That's why it was called Hardball, right? Because he was known for a particularly aggressive style of interviewing that sort of infused his perspective in the question, so that if he had a guest on with the opposite perspective, it would create some tension and some conflict and some drama. That's why it's called Hardball. Let's play Hardball. That's what he would say at the beginning of every show. And now he's like, whoa. This is like cable news, what you're doing to me here.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, not having seen him in years, because he's been off in the wilderness. This whole segment really reminded you what a fucking unconscionable asshole Chris Matthews is. And as our audience knows, I'm not the wokiest wokey in Wokeland, but talk about a mediocre white man who should never have had a career.
Right.
Exactly. What the fuck does Chris Matthews bring to the table that he was on TV for fucking decades? What the fuck? His analysis is clueless. He has this absolute confidence that he knows what he's talking about. He carries himself with that. Yeah, this is what I'm good at, political analysis. Well, there is no evidence of that here any more than there was on your fucking worthless show.
Yeah, exactly.
You're sitting here saying who was for Bernie Sanders. You don't know what the fuck is going on. You don't know what you're talking about. But, and this is why I think of the critique of the mediocre white man, he's very confident in his never correct opinions. He's really confident that he's an expert in whatever the fuck he thinks. Politics. He knows politics because he knew Tip O'Neill. Right?
Yeah, no, he's like the Joe Buck of political commentary. Sports fans in the audience will know Joe Buck, the go-to big game announcer.
I thought you were talking about John Voight's character, Midnight Cowboy. I was like, I don't see that.
Sports fans will know Joe Buck. Joe Buck is a talented broadcaster, but clearly knows very little about the games that he broadcasts, right?
Yes, that's a good way to put it, yes.
And the same thing with him. Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's really off-putting for me personally about him, so he likes to project that he's some kind of pugnacious working class Irish kind of a Pole from the old school, kind of understands working class people, and somehow he seems to always draw the same neoliberal conclusions. He's one of those reverse class traders. Tusker's always talking about PMC class traders. He's a class trader in the other direction.
Right.
He tries to pretend that he represents a working class point of view by maybe saying, as he does in this interview, yeah, that's tough for people when they can't pay for gas. Oh, really, Einstein? Well, thanks for that. Thanks for acknowledging that it's hard for people without a lot of money to pay for gas. And that is the extent of his working class bona fides, and it always was. He loved to say shit like that on his show. Well, the guy who's eating a couple of hot dogs, maybe he doesn't like mustard. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up, you fucking rich prick trying to represent the working class with your fucking Reaganomics.
Extra Bola, rest in peace, Ed Schultz, King. Yes, Ed Schultz was an example.
Oh, shit.
Well, no, he died a while back. But what he's talking about, Ed Schultz, is Ed Schultz was a pro-Bernie voice on MSNBC, and they fired him a few weeks after covering the campaign launch. So, yes.
I think I might have known that he died at one point, but I completely forgot.
Forgot about it, yeah. But he was a pro-Bernie voice that they shit-canned after he launched his campaign.
Oh, yeah. That was the only one.
Right.
That was, yeah. No, I mean, Matthews should go back to the wilderness. Just watching this just reminded me what a fucking contemptuous little creep he was. And you could totally see him sexually harassing people. It's not much of a tweak of his personality. Hey, doll, come on in here.
Right.
I like that dress.
Yeah.
Instead of, maybe a variety of opinions or whatever, you had an overwhelming, every single host just completely opposed to it, completely contemptful of the movement, or at times gripped by sheer terror that he might win.
Give me some examples.
But hold on.
Give me some examples.
Give me some examples.
Okay, well,
Give me names.
You did float.
Here's an example of you floating the idea that you'd be executed in Central Park.
Rounded up and executed in Central Park if he won. So you
Let me play that again.
You did float that you might be rounded up and executed in Central Park if he won. So you also.
No, I didn't like Bernie. Look, I thought Bernie Sanders. I made it very clear.
Yes.
I never said anything about Hitler.
But what
talk about the lady doth protest too much. I made it very clear I never said anything about Hitler, because he knows he was shit canned for making that Nazi comparison. And so his mind goes, when she mentions that, his mind goes to the Nevada caucus, where he got in trouble for comparing Bernie's victory, a Jewish man's victory at the Nevada caucuses, to the Nazi occupation of France. And so he reverts back to this very defensive posture where he says, I never said anything about Hitler. She didn't say anything about Hitler there either. She's referring to a different example where you said, hey, is Bernie the Denmark style, sort of Northern European, Scandinavian socialist, or the revolutionary socialist who's going to have executions in Central Park? That's what she's talking about there. And he gaslights here too. Watch.
I did not directly reference Der Fuhrer.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But what I'm...
I never said anything about Hitler.
Okay, there was, I believe, a Nazi comparison.
No, I wasn't. No, you have to answer.
There was a Nazi comparison that was made, absolutely. That was
the
overt.
fall of France.
Right, the fall of France. Winston Churchill, they say, Mr. Churchill, France is gone, right? That was absolutely a direct Nazi comparison that now you're trying to gaslight about. But that's not even the example she's talking about.
Floated that people might be rounded up, but this is true.
She does have her facts straight.
You might be rounded up in Central Park and executed if he was president. Okay, so as one example,
that's literally what
that is literally what you said. Let's go to the tape.
My own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other people would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side.
And the downside is what?
Bernie supports over these years.
See, so there he goes. There he goes.
That is a perfect example of what I'm saying. If he thinks that him being executed in a socialist revolution is not a bug but a feature,
right?
He's really misreading the appetite of the public for such an event.
So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's a
fucking idiot who mistakes a Brooklyn accent for a Boston accent, too. He's like the worst Brooklyn accent ever. He's trying to mock his Brooklyn accent. Instead, he does a Boston.
So that's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
It's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, did he tell you that? You guys covered the campaign. You covered the campaign. Did he tell you that? So there you go. All right. So let's just put to rest any of the bullshit that he's trying to spin where, I didn't actually suggest that Bernie was adjacent to the kind of revolutionary socialist who would hang me in Central Park.
Yeah. I mean, this is just a perfect example. Like, why would you pay this moron millions of dollars? And we hit it.
Beautiful. Made it. Beautiful. All right, let's go back to Krystal Ball, present day. We just had to set the record straight there. We had to bring a little receipt for you all.
The overall tenor of the coverage of the network was very negative. Was that individuals making choices? Was that like a voice coming down from the network? Or was that a problem of groupthink?
Individuals.
It was all individuals. So at your time in the network.
Who would have talked to me?
Your
Who would have
boss.
We have lots of friends in this town.
It's individuals making choices.
All the women avoided my office like the plague, and they were the communicators.
It is individuals making choices. That's the point. And that's what we always said. That was always our retort to people who were saying, are you suggesting there's a conspiracy at news cycles to spin a certain narrative? No, that's the point. We're saying they only hire people who will voluntarily spin the narrative that they want. They don't need to call a meeting and have messaging meetings, right? The reason you are in that chair is because they trust you to parrot their point of view. If you don't parrot their point of view, they force you out of that chair. That's what they did to Ed Schultz, who covered the Bernie Sanders launch event in Burlington. He gets a call from, I believe it was Phil Griffin at the time. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was, saying, we're not covering this event. And Ed Schultz says, yes, we are. I'm here. This is a presidential candidate declaring he's running for president. Of course we're covering it. 3 weeks later, he was fired. So what kind of message do you think that sends? There doesn't have to be a conspiracy. They don't need central command. People are smart enough to see who keeps their job and who loses their job, and that's how it works. So this is just another straw man.
Yeah, that's what Taibbi always talks about. How, look, you don't need someone to tell you what the incentives are. You can see who gets their stories approved, who doesn't, who moves up the chain at the newspaper, who stays where they are or gets pushed out, and that favors a certain type of person who's going to parrot a certain kind of narrative. That having been said, Chunk over there at TYT always tells that story about how he was called in and told, rebels, they're cool with the motorcycle and the leather jacket, but we're not rebels, we're insiders. So I do believe conversations like that go on as well to reinforce it when somebody goes off the reservation.
Yeah, but the message is heard loud and clear, whether there's a backroom meeting or not. They make sure everybody understands.
Yeah,
you're certainly in touch with the network executives who want to have be in good with the next administration.
I never got a point of view told to me from anybody in the executive role.
So it's just
no, because the executives could all trust you to be a fucking imbecile.
Oh yeah,
because
especially
him.
They
need
Why
to
would
push
they
you
have
around?
to tell you to be anti-working class while pretending to have working class affect?
Chris, we need you to cool it on the power to the people stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
You're getting a little too,
populist Chris. They call
We're owned by Comcast after all.
Happenstance that every single person at the network hated this one particular candidate.
I don't think the hate is the right word.
Looks like it from the outside.
This is amazing.
People can speak to their own view at the time.
I thought at the time, just to put this back in where I'm factual and accountable, I thought when Bernie was headed toward winning in New Hampshire and winning in Nevada big time, and I couldn't see even results coming in from the others, the moderates, from Biden and those.
Right.
And I get concerned that they've disappeared
that they weren't even there, because in the afternoon in Nevada, we didn't even have any numbers coming in from anybody but Bernie. Bernie was winning that thing in a landslide.
Right.
And anybody who'd been through 1972 knew what happens when the Democratic Party goes that far left.
It's always
a person like
McGovern.
Bernie Sanders up
It's always
there.
McGovern. Anyone to the left of Francisco Franco is George McGovern.
Exactly.
Of 1972.
McGovern.
Okay. And I saw McGovern got beaten in almost every state. And I thought that was wrong for the Democrats to do that. I thought Bernie was probably, or Elizabeth was going to win. And of course I wasn't happy with either one of them.
But what do you think?
Why would I be happy with people that are probably going to lose?
Why would I be happy with people who are probably going to lose? So he's trying
Like
to now
Hillary did?
spin his
Like Hillary?
anti-Bernie bias as an electability concern.
Sure.
This is a guy whose victory in Nevada you compared to, yes, the Nazi occupation of France. This is a guy who you said, hey, is he a Scandinavian-style socialist or the kind that's going to hang me in Central Park? Now you're trying to say, no, it wasn't that I didn't like him. It's that I was afraid they were going to lose. Right.
That was the only problem.
Exactly.
It wasn't comparing them to, Pol Pot or whatever the fuck.
Right. I mean, if you had
trying
any
to indicate.
decency or any respect for the audience, you would say, hey, the reason I made those comparisons, even though I knew they were unfair, is because I was trying to knock him out of the race because I thought he was going to lose to Trump. And then that would have been bullshit, but at least you're really there, at least demonstrating some modicum of respect for the audience who has a very good memory about all this stuff, especially on Krystal Ball's show. That was not the concern that you guys were echoing. There was a lot of he can't win, but it was mostly this guy is out of bounds for who he is and the views he represents. We don't like them.
Sure.
We don't like them. They had this intrinsic, sort of inherent hatred for him. It wasn't just that he's going to lose to Trump. It wasn't, oh yeah, we'd love to nominate Bernie.
He
but
makes
can't
my
win.
skin crawl.
Right, he makes my skin crawl.
Do you
Exactly.
remember?
Yeah,
I don't even know the name of the reporter. This was a very infamous clip where she was covering Nevada and she's doing the numbers and she goes, and it looks like Bernie Sanders is.
Yeah, right. The deep sigh. Yeah.
I mean, you didn't have a personal animus towards him. I mean, you couldn't have made that animus more clear. And I'm sure if we wanted to put the effort into it, it's really not worth doing. You could very easily, Mr. Political Calculation, do a 3-hour supercut of Chris Matthews talking about how Hillary has it in the bag.
I'm sure you could. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what a bizarre week it's been where we've had to defend both Marianne Williamson and Krystal Ball. What do you think? See, anybody who says we're unfair, not true.
Yeah,
not
that's
true.
it. We'll
We'll give credit
fair.
where it's due.
And
Indeed.
we're gonna be fair about the Barbie movie too. So
Exactly.
tune in for that.
Tune in for that. That'll be Sunday before the Rumble switch over. We'll have that review. Patrick Donahue, thanks for the €5. Good to see the show's getting bigger and bigger. Live viewing figures from U.S. Euro followers. Here's to many more. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. And this is all because of you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. Courtney Conover, thanks for the $5. I ordered you guys a gift. Oh, that's very nice of you, Courtney. Send me a P.O. box in the DM so when it gets here, I could ship it. All right, I will DM you this afternoon. Thank you, Courtney. We appreciate that very much. It's very kind.
Our very first contributor to our GoFundMe campaign.
That's right. Courtney was our very first contributor to the GoFundMe campaign. Here, we'll put the link up here while we read a couple more of these. Lita Gray, thank you, Lita. I don't believe I've read a super chat from you before, but thank you. Moronic YouTube lefties took a fake Facebook post saying anything that Anthony Oliver, I think his name is Oliver Anthony, but that's okay, loved Biden, posted by a weird Swifty X account as the truth. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, no, he
Interesting.
seems like a real Biden lover.
Seems like a real
guy.
Biden bro. Yeah, I'll have to look that up. There's been some coverage of that I want to cover. Maybe Sunday in our first hour, but for sure. Red and Goo, thank you for the $5. We appreciate that. Joyce has been a member for a month. Thank you, Joyce. Would it be cheaper to give money through your DD.com? Because GoFund always wants a donation for their site upkeep. We're not gonna mess with the GoFundMe. They take a modest fee.
They take it such.
We're
a
gonna
small
keep
fee.
it through GoFundMe. But thank you so much. We
Yeah,
appreciate
if you
your
can-
concern, but if we start telling people, okay, here, it's going to
yeah.
get disorganized. It's going to complicate us reaching that goal that we can keep track of and communicate. So, yeah, we'll stick with the GoFundMe for this one, Joyce. But thank you. I appreciate the concern.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you so much. Mario Lorenzo. Years ago, I drove Hunter S. Thompson in my cab.
Wow.
Oh, wow. To a lecture at Tulane University in New Orleans. He said he wasn't feeling well because he was dry heaving all day. Wow, so you actually met Hunter S. Thompson. That's crazy.
I met him too when I got that autograph.
When you got the autograph signed, yeah, indeed.
That was at Virgin Music in Times Square, and him and Johnny Depp were doing an event. He did some readings from Fear and Loathing. Johnny Depp looked really rough, man. He looked like he had been partying with Hunter, and it had taken a real toll on him, man. He had like purple bruises under his eyes, like, you know, like Thompson was running around with a freaking like fake knife stabbing the staff. Like it was what you would expect. But when I got up to Johnny Depp, I said, I really appreciate your work, and you know, he struck me as a pretty nice guy. Like, actually, like, he wasn't just like, yeah. Like, he actually, we talked a little bit for a minute. And, you know, when you got a line of hundreds of people, I think that speaks well of you when you're actually present talking to some rando that you're signing a book for. And Thompson was just what you'd expect, a drunken maniac running around the place harassing people, and, you know. But it was, I mean, it was cool.
It's an experience for sure.
I met Hunter Thompson, man.
Apocalyptic Optimist, thanks to the $4.99. What happens when you don't have the Second Amendment in your country? The state is allowed without restrictions to terrorize. Look, I'm not totally unsympathetic to that point, obviously, but, you know, there's not a law in the UK that you can fire at the police when they do that anyway. Like, you're always going to run into that oppressiveness of the state either way. But that is a fair point, and I've heard that point echoed many times. Joyce, thanks for the $20. If we don't believe in the freedom of expression for people we despise, we don't believe in it at all. Noam Chomsky.
That's
Indeed.
it. That's it. Otherwise, what is it? There is no freedom of speech.
That's why it exists.
Not for people you disagree with.
It exists to protect unpopular speech. You don't need freedom of speech to do the secular talk show, right? I mean, that's inoffensive to everybody. You don't need a First Amendment for that.
Right.
Exactly.
We need that shit.
Right.
That's actually, I mean, it's something I've never really, you know, considered. Like, I'm not going to move to England or anything. But if I were going to move to Europe, I would have to pick the right country because of this fucking show. I could get arrested.
Right.
Like, if I lived in England, I could literally get arrested, not just for this show, for the shit I put on social media all the time, man. Police could come to my door. You have to pick the right country. And, you know, as Americans, particularly American leftists, we tend to idealize Europe. We tend to think of it as a much better place. And it is in some respects, but not in all respects.
Mr. Riffley, thank you for the $20. We appreciate that. That's very generous of you, my friend. Diablo Neruda, I'm good friends with Stephanie Wynn. Here's a thank you for the signal boost. Oh, cool. You know Stephanie. Awesome. Good to know. All righty. We will take the rest of our super chats before we wrap, but this is a really interesting story. I'm really glad that we got to cover this today. And so let's talk about this because we are going to be covering the Republican primary debates in some form or another on Wednesday night. Defend Trump and hammer Ramaswamy. DeSantis allies reveal debate strategy. Hundreds of pages of blunt advice, memos, and internal polling were posted online by the main super PAC backing the Florida governor, offering an extraordinary glimpse into his operations thinking. So basically, Ron DeSantis' debate prep strategy was leaked, presumably by a super PAC that is trying to influence the campaign without actually directly influencing the campaign. This is sort of a workaround where they can send their message as to how they want the campaign run without directly coordinating, because that would be a violation of campaign finance law. So we're going to read a little bit from the Times piece. Ron DeSantis needs to take a sledgehammer, quote unquote, to Vivek Ramaswamy. By the way, people have been calling him Vivek, but apparently it's Vivek, and I'll get to that later. The political newcomer who is rising in the polls. He should, quote, defend Donald Trump when Chris Christie inevitably attacks the former president. and he needs to, quote, attack Joe Biden and the media no less than 3 to 5 times. A firm associated with the super PAC that has effectively taken over Mr. DeSantis' presidential campaign posted online hundreds of pages of blunt advice, research memos, and internal polling in early nominating states to guide the Florida governor ahead of the high-stakes Republican presidential debate next Wednesday in Milwaukee. The trove of documents provides an extraordinary glimpse into the thinking of the DeSantis operation about a debate the candidate's advisors see as crucial. It is crucial for him, for sure. Quote, there are 4 basic must-dos, one of the memos urges Mr. DeSantis, whom the document refers to as GRD, Governor Ron DeSantis. Number 1, attack Biden and the media 3 to 5 times. Number 2, state GRD's positive vision 2 to 3 times. Number 3, hammer Vivek Ramaswamy in a response. Number 4, defend Donald Trump in absentia in response to a Chris Christie attack, which they know is going to come. This is a little later in the article. Addressed simply to interested parties, the memo describes Roger Ailes' orchestra pit theory, quoting the now deceased Fox News executive and political strategist's well-known maxim that a candidate who lays out a comprehensive plan on foreign policy will draw less coverage than the one who accidentally falls off the debate stage.
Apparently making Joe Biden a political genius.
Exactly. If only we knew about this orchestra pit theory. Maybe he knew something we didn't. Exactly. Yeah. To that end, the memo lists potential orchestra pit moments, beginning with one drama-making opportunity, complete with recommendations for a Trump-style insult. Take a sledgehammer to Vivek Ramaswamy. This is why I figured out his name was pronounced Vivek, because fake Vivek would make no sense. Fake Vivek, boom, you got a rhyme. Maybe DeSantis' campaign is on the rebound. Or check this one out. Vivek the snake, Vivek the fake? No, that doesn't make it. Vivek the fake. Beautiful. Fake, yeah. All right. Now you're on to something. Now you're on to something. This was just a funny anecdote that I thought, or not an anecdote, a funny piece that I thought I should throw in here. The debate prep memo also urges Mr. DeSantis to defend Trump when Christie attacks him with a specific suggestion for an attack line, accusing Mr. Christie, the former New Jersey governor, of appealing mainly to Democrats. Quote, Trump isn't here, so let's just leave him alone. He's too weak to defend himself here. We're all running against him. I don't think we want to join forces with someone on this stage who's auditioning for a show on MSNBC. Now, talk about jockeying for second place. And so he's talking about defending him while not defending him. Hey, let's lay off of Donald Trump to try and win some of the MAGA people. And then in the very next line, he's too weak and pussy to appear here. Maybe you're going to win some Chris Christie votes there. You're certainly not going to cut into Donald Trump's base of support with that. They see Vivek Ramaswamy as a big threat. This is our first opportunity to really put our horse race caps on for real and say that if he's planning to attack Ramaswamy, that is a very, very high-risk decision. Now, maybe he feels he has to make a high-risk decision because without Trump there, he figures the only way to really create a moment would be to distinguish himself in a positive way from Ramaswamy, who is now his closest challenger for second place. But that is high risk because Ramaswamy appeared on the Tucker Carlson show this week, and we're going to play a clip from that later. But Ramaswamy is a talent, and if he tries to come at Ramaswamy, he could give Ramaswamy one of those Tulsi Kamala moments where Ron DeSantis can become the Kamala Harris to Ramaswamy's Tulsi Gabbard, and Ramaswamy could just sink him right there. If he has an implosion moment like that, that could be the end of Meatball Ron's campaign. Yes. Not saying that is how it will happen, but that's a high risk. Yeah, it's high risk. What do you think, Russell? Sorry, I saw you reading something.
We just got a very large donation.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
I will talk about it later. It's large enough to talk about. Joyce contributed $2,000.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, so much. Oh, wow, that's amazing.
I
don't know how we can do the show after that.
I think, do we have to still do this show? We can retire now.
Can we retire? Well, Joyce, that's extremely generous of you. Please do get in touch with us. We would love to send you a shirt. I mean, you're signed up through Patreon as well, right? So I should be getting you a shirt. If you're signed up through Patreon and you're owed a shirt, send us your shirt sizes. Some of you guys already have. As you can see, they're coming out. But if you haven't sent those shirt sizes and mailing addresses, please do that. But thank you so much, Joyce.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Look, man, I'll drink the rot gut, but I prefer Red Label. So thank you. Now we don't have to get into the crank. We can stick with the good stuff, the crystal meth. But just like that, we are halfway to our goal.
Halfway to 6K. Halfway
we are
to 6K.
Halfway to 6K. So this thing, listen, man, if this goes beyond Iowa, New Hampshire, those will be fun. But if this goes to Texas, imagine us in Texas. So please contribute, make it happen, do what you can to drag out this primary race so that it does happen. Make sure, split your votes, Vivek, as we now know. But yeah, man, we're halfway there now. So if you can contribute, please do. Might throw up the GoFundMe link one more time.
We will. I'll do it. I'll do that once we wrap this segment up.
All right.
We'll be taking more super chats.
So Vake, I don't know if you caught this. We'll call him by his right name since that's it. I don't know if you caught this, but Tucker asked him about a non-binary woman he had an exchange with, and I had seen that exchange because the conservative YouTubers were covering it, and she asked him about his attitude about gender, and so Tucker had a whole section, but he said at one point, yeah, no, I think a lot of these people are lost, and I could see it in her eyes, and I thanked her for being open to having a civil conversation because there were other people there ringing cowbells and you couldn't talk to them. Did you catch that?
Oh, you actually put the cowbell thing, yeah.
He said
I didn't
that.
catch that. I did watch the interview last night, but I didn't actually catch the cowbell.
No, man. Apparently it was not just that freak. Apparently the cowbell left is a thing coast to coast. These people like to run around and ring cowbells.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, that's going to be an interesting debate if he decides to go at Ramaswamy. I think it's very, very high risk. And I want to talk a little bit about Ramaswamy now. Yeah, he's got a lot of skills. Definitely a lot of skills. Ramaswamy appeared on Tucker Carlson's show, his new Twitter show, to talk about the campaign and what distinguishes him from the rest of the Republican field. And so why don't we take a look at this video here? I just have to pull this up. For some reason, it went away. I must have deleted it by accident. I will get it right now. Sorry, everybody. Here we go. So this is Vivek Ramaswamy on Tucker Carlson talking about the Ukraine war. And this was really, really interesting, the way he sort of positioned himself in the field there.
Are we going to that?
It's playing. Here it is.
There was, some of our audience reference it. Some of them are old enough. I bring in the oldies, you bring in the youngies. It's like the Beatles, we each appeal to a different sector. There was this movie called The Groove Tube where they did a bit like that, where, on the news where they freeze. Clearly there's nothing left on the teleprompter and they just don't cut away.
Right.
And the bit was having that go on for like 10 minutes.
Maybe this is why that video went away in the first place. So here, let's play this. This should make it now. It should be loaded in.
So you said something when I saw you in Iowa earlier this summer. You said something really, really interesting about donors. And you are an interesting figure because you're effectively from the donor class. You're a rich guy running for president. Now you're dealing with donors from the other side. Mm-hmm. And you said that your views on Ukraine had given a lot of them pause.
Yes. There's no doubt that I have lost otherwise willing and interested donors or potential mega donors to my campaign over my position on Ukraine, which is fascinating because I don't think there's any particular self-interest at issue. It's not like somebody saying, oh, well, I own, a big chunk of Raytheon or something like that, and I'm going to have my interests harmed. Therefore, I'm not going to back you because that will harm my self-interest. That'd be an easy and fun and facile explanation, but that's not what's going on. I think there is a deeper bipartisan institutional consensus, the same consensus that said we can't be told the truth about 9/11, that effectively says that we can't confront.
He is not a full-blown what we would call a 9/11 truther. He's kind of more where I am about 9/11, which is that there's stuff that clearly has not been disclosed for reasons that are not exactly kosher. So he's certainly far outside the mainstream in Washington, D.C. on 9/11, which is a risky fucking position. I mean, it's a risky position to take. And now as his campaign gets momentum, I mean, there is a very, very strong chance that he can become the quote unquote Trump with no baggage, as we will say, as we will explore once this video ends.
Front some of the same facts about Ukraine. And I try not to be reactive, Tucker, because it is a natural impulse where,
of course,
at least the way I'm wired is, if somebody tells you not to do something, there's almost a natural temptation to go in that direction.
Right.
So I would like to think, and I believe my position here is grounded in fact and not that reactive emotion, but it's interesting that it makes me doubly committed to making sure that I'm really speaking the truth about what's going on here, at least because it means that the rest of the field absolutely is not. Right. I mean, the rest of
that's kind of the
entire
question.
Republican field, not one of them. I mean, Donald Trump, we could say he wants to end the war. He hasn't said exactly how, but save for Trump, right? Nobody on the debate stage, certainly for the Republican Party, has a principled position on Ukraine, partly because they understand those are the directions they've been given.
So you think?
Okay, now this gets interesting. This gets interesting.
I think it's interesting because there are a couple of fairly smart, I know them, people running for president right now in the Republican field, whose positions on Ukraine are like idiotic
or indiscernible.
Right. They don't even make sense.
Some are idiotic. The idiotic one is just we have to arm them to the teeth, give them as much money as possible because we stand with Ukraine. The indiscernible ones are the ones where they'll tell you one thing and then they'll tell their donors one thing and then they don't know where they actually stand because they're being buffeted.
But that's the effect of donor pressure. Right.
It is. It really is.
Okay, so he distinguishes the idiotic Ukraine take with the indiscernible Ukraine take. The idiotic Ukraine take being the Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Slavy Ukraine, just give them all the money until the end. We're going to win, rah, rah, rah. The indiscernible take, where you tell the audience one thing and you tell your donors another thing, he's talking about Ron DeSantis there. That's who he is referencing there. This sort of mealy mouth, we're not going to commit troops on the ground. It's a territorial dispute. But on the other hand, it is important that we, keep Putin at bay. He's talking about Ron DeSantis there. So he's ready for Ron DeSantis if Ron DeSantis tries to come at him. And this is why I say Vivek might emerge as the quote unquote Trump with no baggage, because he is sort of unapologetically in the Trump camp on Ukraine, even though he does have a criticism for Trump as just being kind of shallow in his understanding of the issue, which is I'll end it in 24 hours, right? So he has that issue correct in the eyes of the MAGA base. The other thing that's dangerous about Vivek Ramaswamy to DeSantis is that Ramaswamy seems to incorporate or sort of fuse the sort of anti-woke critique that DeSantis has with a sort of broader political vision. Whereas DeSantis doesn't seem to illustrate a broader vision. He's an executive. He signs bills and laws like that. He's very sort of technical and functionary.
Right.
Vivek really, he incorporates a lot of the anti-woke stuff into a bigger vision about the future and about the world and how these issues sort of connect. Like he connected, and I don't agree with exactly how he did this, obviously, but he connected the gender debate to the climate debate about how a lot of principles that the left sort of embraces now have become religious in nature, right? And I'm not saying I would sign off on everything he says in that way, but that's a broader, more thematic critique than, say, going after Disney or something like that. And so if he can get on the correct side of the Ukraine issue and he can make DeSantis look bad on the debate stage on Wednesday, you could see a major surge in momentum for him in these next few weeks. Is it enough to catch Trump? Only time will tell that. But he is positioned very, very well in advance of this debate to make a major impact and rack up major points.
Okay, so Ramaswamy, it's interesting. There's a whole kind of venture capitalist guy talking about how the world really works, industrial complex, Ray Diallo, Peter Zahan. They do these videos about, kind of the macroeconomic vision that a venture capitalist hedge fund person might have and connecting all of those dots. So a lot of what he was doing there was kind of in that school. I thought what he had to say about Taiwan was even more interesting than what he had to say about Ukraine, and pointing out, I think, we know this because we're in this space and we're politics junkies. That's why we're in this space. I don't think most Americans know that the reason we're so concerned about Taiwan, just like we're concerned about the Middle East because of oil, we're concerned about Taiwan because of microchips, because they have the leading manufacturer of microchips in Taiwan, the most advanced microchips in the world. And he pointed out, without that, our modern way of life could not function. So we need to focus on really accelerating the process of building our own microchip factories, at which point he basically said, why is Taiwan our concern? It's our concern right now because we can't afford to have China take over those microchip factories. And this is something I don't think I've ever seen a presidential candidate explain this to Americans. I don't think most Americans are aware that that's really what's going on there.
No, and he did get a little scary there, too, because he said, I would not send our sons and daughters to die in a nationalist dispute between Taiwan and China. Implicit in that is that he might send our sons and daughters to die if there is a national interest in defending Taiwan, i.e. the microchips. Now, that's a little scary to me because I think it's extremely important that we solve this nonviolently so that no sons or daughters have to die anywhere and that there's not a nuclear exchange, right? But he at least expressed some sort of articulation that actually we have to lessen our dependence.
And he's also making the point, and he's not wrong, that China taking over those microchip plants would be kind of existential for the United States, because at that point, they could completely dictate the terms, which his theory is that their terms would be, we'll give you the microchips, you give us your IP.
Right.
And we wouldn't be in much of a position to dispute it. Now, whether I know there are certainly people in our audience who would cheer for that. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm saying he's giving a much more thorough and accurate geopolitical explanation of why we even give a shit about Taiwan than you see us defending Java.
Right. Oh,
right?
Well, exactly. Exactly.
And I don't think most
makes him a Trumpian figure in that way. Just very honest about what our foreign policy aims are.
Well, I thought he was out-trumping Trump in a lot of respects, because not only does he have this very honest, much more that's why I mentioned Ray Diallo, Peter Zion. It's a much more Wall Street. I always say I trust the financial press more because it's for degenerate gamblers. So they're not as politically biased in the economic press because they're trying to tell people what stocks to buy. Right? I mean, it's not that you never see a bias, but you ignore the Jim Cramers and the clowns and the performers like that. Generally, their articles are going to be more accurate about what's happening overseas, right? Because this is aimed at an audience that's trying to figure out how to invest their money. And if they're wrong about that, nobody's going to read these articles, right? So they have to be accurate and kind of nonpartisan and non-political about it. So that's kind of what he's bringing here. It's very much like what you would read in The Economist or Barron's or, the Wall Street Journal. This is the deal. They make the chips. We need the chips. This is why we do this. And his whole foreign policy vision was like that, which it's like Trump with a brain. Trump has a gut instinct, as you often say, analog, right? Yes, well, why are we not stocking shelves with these goods? Well, right. This is a much more updated 2.0, 21st century venture capitalist, Wall Street oriented interpretation that's similar, but fleshed out and not so much just based on a gut instinct that things shouldn't work this way. He can actually explain to you the way it works and why and what you can do about it in a way that Trump can't. I always said Trump was overestimated and lucky in his enemies. When you look at how much more credibility Vivek Ramaswamy has when he speaks, imagine putting that next to Trump.
Well, that's
how
what
does
I mean.
Trump look if you put that side by side.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, unfortunately for Ramaswamy, they're not going to be side by side. It looks very unlikely that Trump will show up at the debate on Wednesday.
Down the line, maybe, though. He starts gaining.
Right. If he starts gaining and they have to, then it's possible. It is possible. And to me, the highest risk candidate going in to Wednesday is Meatball Ron, obviously, because especially if he's going to pick a fight with Ramaswamy, he's got to know who he's picking a fight with. It looks like this guy could really twist him into knots if he wants to.
He's the first really talented new politician to pop up in a very long time. Like the whole 2020 election cycle, you didn't really see anyone with talent emerge. We're like, oh, that's somebody to watch. Like literally nobody came out of that entire race on the Democratic side that anybody said, oh yeah, that person's got
keep your eye on him.
Keep your eye. This is the first, and on the Republican side, they had an incumbent. So this is the first fresh phase with political talent we've seen in a very long time. We're watching that Tucker interview. Yeah, he's able to convey that sense. This would represent a change. And if this guy were in charge, things would be done differently. And I kind of like what he's saying. We haven't seen that in ages, really. I can't think of the last person.
Yeah, no, I think that is well said. All right, folks, we're going to read some super chats before we wrap. Bonzo Beans asks, are you aware of the COVID dissidents in Switzerland who walked around through their town in 2021 carrying big-ass, heavy, actual cowbells on their shoulders, probably the opposite of the cowbell left? No, Bonzo Beans, I had not heard of that. That's a Rumble rant, by the way, from Bonzo Beans. But that's
I could have used a little more cowbell.
That's interesting. I did get your previous 3 Rumble rants, which are just recommendations for Russell when he goes to Rome. I screenshotted them, and I will send them over to Russell once we're done. So thank you for those.
Right now, I got the Vatican booked. I've got the Colosseum with the underground booked. I plan on obviously going to Pompeii. I'm going to go out to Tivoli to see the ancient estates out there. And I'm going to go to Via Appia. It's actually a 2,000-year-old roadway. It was the main road of Rome. And you still have the crumbling family crypts on either side of it. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be an epic trip. Sounds like. Laugh. Thanks for the 10 pounds. Trying to post a comment about countries brainwashing children to hate other races, other countries, people. YouTube says no, so this is the edited version with no examples. Okay, so here's the edited version with nothing to substantiate my claim. But that's crazy. Okay, I trust you, and what are you gonna do? Thank you, Laugh. Overdue, thanks for the $10. I'm 83 with a failing liver. Please hurry to fuck up with the Vega documentary. Yeah, we will get to it. We are getting to it. We're working on it. RBGH fam, thanks for the $5. MMT is the greatest money laundering apparatus government ever thought of. Increase money laundered to investments, less buying power for the poor. It's funny. We're going to the library today.
You're picking a fight with a lot of our audience. They come for us every time we criticize MMT.
Well, first of all, to be clear, I've never criticized it because I don't know enough about it. But it's funny because we are making a family trip to the library this afternoon where I'm going to be exchanging Thomas Frank's book, The People Know, for another book, and maybe I will pick up Stephanie Kelton's book if they have it, and I'll read that so that we can talk about it in a more informed manner. So thank you for that. I'm glad you actually mentioned that on a day when I'm going to be at the library anyway. Kuzetsky Bassane, thanks for the $4.99. We appreciate that. Franklin says, have a good weekend, guys. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. And Franklin also asks for another $5. Thank you. Isn't China already in control of those microchip plants? That's another thing I would have to look into more, but I don't think so. I think that's the whole dispute.
No. That's that's controlled by Taiwan. China considers Taiwan a part of China, and that's what the whole dispute is about. And it's just this Mexican standoff.
Right.
It's been rumored that Taiwan would blow up the plants if China invades. That's kind of part of what they're holding over their heads. Like they've kind of put out the word, well, those plants might not be there if you make a move. Right. So it's a dangerous situation, more dangerous than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, it could be. I believe that. I certainly believe that. Bonzo Beans for another buck. Like I said, when our producer Jake is here, we can put these on the screen. Friday mornings, I can only read them, but I promise to read them. Bonzo Beans, thanks for the $1 Rumble rant. I hear the Russians have mastered reusing microchips in refrigerators for their missile systems since Western sanctions. I'm sure they'd be willing to share their learnings with the U.S. Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like they'd be totally willing to give us some advice on that. Yeah. Thank you.
I haven't looked into it enough to really talk about it. Apparently, they're having some problems with their currency now as a result of the sanctions.
All righty, folks. Well, that is all we've got today. We thank you very much for being here. We appreciate that very much. Once again, the GoFundMe, we are now halfway to our goal. Thank you very much to all who have donated. Donors large and small, very important. So thank you so much. GoFund.me/all that shit. You can also go to GoFund.me and just search Do Dissidents and you will find us there. You can also go to Patreon.com/Do Dissidents and support the show. That's a great way to support the show. We have a patron exclusive stream coming up on Monday, August 21st. Lots of stuff to talk about on that stream that we might not necessarily be allowed to talk about here. Those are a lot of fun, those patron streams. They're really, really fun. They're really cool. They're very loose. It's the uncensored version of the show, which is the version of the show that we want to be able to do anyway. So those are really cool. You get a taste of what we would do if we could do it. Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. So folks, thank you very much. I'm going to go see the Barbie movie, do research for Sunday's show, and I'm going to go to the library and hopefully find an MMT book to take out as well at our audience's recommendation. We will see you all back here Monday night, 7 p.m. That stream will be split, half on YouTube, half on Rumble. So please go to rumble.com/Do Dissidents and follow us over there so you are all good to go when that happens. We'll leave this up on the screen as we play our outro out. We will see you folks on Sunday. Thank you very much for being here this morning. It was a pleasure as always. Until we see you again, please do be safe and be well.
Courage.
Please clap.